Hey there, this is Phil. Welcome back to the podcast. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm happy.
You weren't here last week.
I was gone. You're right. I was at a lacrosse tournament.
You were missing.
We kind of got derailed because you weren't here.
Oh, no.
We talked about space worms for like an hour and a half.
I bet your audience loved it.
And Sky Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Sky. How are you?
I'm in black.
Yeah.
He's back in black.
So are you.
So are you.
What's the next line of that song? Back in black.
It's probably not one we should repeat.
Groceries in a sack.
I don't know.
I don't know what it is. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. And Christian, too.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. We've got a guest from Charleston, South Carolina here for you. Hi, guest from Charleston, South Carolina.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
That's fantastic. Hey, it's a podcast.
Live in Charleston.
So in here, the Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
Wouldn't it be great if it was just some total random person from Charlton?
Yeah.
Charleston.
Charleston. And his name was Charlton?
Carlton.
From
Charleston.
And he danced the Charleston?
Yeah.
Can you dance the Charleston?
Are you asking Joey Svendsen?
Yeah. Joey Svendsen is
I'm a little
guest.
after that time period. I'm kind of obsessed with the 20s though, so I wish that I could.
Did you grow up in Charleston?
Yes, I did.
So don't they teach the Charleston in elementary school to all Charlestonians?
They do not. But I've watched It's a Wonderful Life a bunch of times, so I should have just picked it up from that scene. Did they teach dance in?
Oh yeah, we all in the Midwest. We all have to learn our state dance.
Actually,
I did.
There is square dancing.
Yes,
we learned square dance.
There was a phys ed. There was a phys ed requirement in Illinois that there's a dance unit.
Yeah, there is a dance
unit. It's horrible.
You didn't enjoy getting to square dance with the cute
although my
girls
grades were better at that than the gymnastics set because I always failed that.
Or wrestling. Did you have wrestling in
I
high
did,
school?
yeah.
Oh, that's what. I mean, I'll keep dancing, but get rid of wrestling.
Yeah, it's pretty invasive.
Man,
when you're not
wrestling
into
is
that.
dancing for men with no rhythm and too much testosterone.
So true.
That's what I'll tell you. Okay. Joey Svendsen is the campus pastor at Seacoast Church in Charleston, South Carolina. He's the author of the book Fundamentalist and a co-host of the Bad Christian podcast. Does that mean...
Does bad modify Christian or podcast?
Yeah, I know. Is it a bad podcast?
Both. I think so.
A bad Christian making a podcast?
I was just on their show, so...
Well, then you'll be able to answer that question for us.
No, I've listened to it before. It's a good show.
No, I don't.
No. Hang on a second. Don't just skip over that.
What?
Does it mean
That's the interview. We're not to the interview yet.
Okay.
We'll get there.
You just got to sit on that. That was it. That's what
That's a teaser?
That's what we call a tease.
Okay.
That was a tease.
All right.
In showbiz lingo.
Well, can I have the first question then?
I'm steeped in showbiz lingo.
Yeah.
Can you have the first question? Not right now.
No, when we get to that segment. Yeah, this happens all the time. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
I'm always put in my place.
See, this is just a bad podcast.
Well, he is the creator of VeggieTales. I think he can kind of throw that around.
Yeah, he throws his weight around.
Whatever I want.
And, it kind of is his podcast.
I can go into any grocery store in America and just take vegetables. It's like it's a clause.
I thought you were going to say you could go into any grocery store and make them sing and dance. That's what I thought you were.
Well, yeah, I can pick them up.
They kind of stand up when you get in.
No, they don't stand up.
You should carry a bag of those little glue-on Google eyes that kids play with, and just go around the grocery stores and stick them on produce.
They're not Google eyes. That's a search engine. They're googly eyes.
Googly, whatever.
They're Don't pretend that words don't matter, Sky. Words matter very much.
They do.
I went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to talk about this because you said you didn't have any news, and I was going to say...
Yeah, okay, that was kind of cool. There is a Christian theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Sight and Sound Theater.
I'm impressed it doesn't have a corny name.
I kind of think that is corny, but that's just me.
Sight and Sound isn't that corny.
It started out, it's like 40 years old, and it started out because a guy was taking pictures and then timing them to music and narration and then showing them in churches back in the 60s.
And that's way before PowerPoint.
Way before PowerPoint. Pre-PowerPoint. PowerPoint was just a twinkle in Bill Gates' eyes at the time. And people were going, ooh, why? We've never seen such sights and sounds together in church. And he said, I might be onto something. He was a dairy farmer. This is a true story. I am not making this up.
Okay.
He was a dairy farmer, but he liked taking pictures more. So he started working on more productions like that, where he was pictures and music and narration and inspirational
But the pictures didn't move, right?
No, the pictures did not move. They were slides. But it was so popular that he actually built a small theater just for showing them. And people came to the theater. They came for miles around. This is Amish country.
It makes me wonder about Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
It's Amish country. They don't have electricity.
There's no other entertainment.
Right, but I wouldn't think the Amish would want to go to the Sight and Sound Theater.
Oh, sure they do. I saw Amish when I was there.
Okay.
And then he had the idea, what if there were actors in my slideshows?
I think the Greeks figured this out a long time ago.
No, this started in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And so he put actors in and he wrote parts and they read the parts and people were moved and they wept and they praised God and they built a bigger theater.
You missed a step. They also emptied their pocketbooks.
Well, they bought tickets.
And then they built a bigger theater.
They bought tickets and they built a bigger theater, and the bigger theater burnt down in 1999.
Was it God's judgment?
No, it was a welder. A welder was making sparks, and the sparks fell down into the basement and set scenery on fire.
It could have been just a pruning.
Could have been. No, it was an opportunity.
That's what I mean.
Is what it was. It was an opportunity. So they built an even bigger theater. And now they have this huge theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they put on these massive shows with like horses and camels and a flying whale and the Jonah movie, the one.
And you said there's a water buffalo.
And they own a water buffalo named Ferdinand, and he walks through certain scenes and leaves very large piles in the back lot where I was. Because that's how I found out they had a water buffalo. I was walking by and there was a big pile. And I said, oh, horse? And they said, no, water buffalo.
You don't know your manure.
I don't know my poop.
So what I wonder
astonishing.
Is the reason they brought you there was for...
to inspire their creatives. They're working on inspiring their creatives. So Stephen Kendricks was there a couple months ago. He came out and gave a talk. And then they wanted me to do it.
Okay.
And it turns out they really liked my book, because my book helped them with business decisions.
Which book is this, Phil?
Me, Myself, and Bob.
Well, did that come at the time where the stage or the theater had burned down?
No, it came after they rebuilt and they were growing rather aggressively, maybe too aggressively.
Okay.
Sometimes we grow too aggressively.
We call that cancer.
And we need focus. Cancer? I guess you could call
Or fat.
Well.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, they liked the book. They said it helped them.
When someone says, I have an aggressive growth, that's never a good thing.
What if it's your child?
Well, and growing aggressively is bad, too.
What if it's your child?
If my child has an aggressive growth...
No, your child is aggressively growing.
That was Josh. He grew like 6 inches in 2 years.
Right, that's aggressive growth.
It was.
That's not cancer, Sky. You're calling her beloved son cancer.
No, I'm saying in church world, we always...
Church world? Where's that? Is that in Orlando? I want to go.
We take these stories of churches or ministries that are experiencing aggressive growth and we go, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But
and then here comes Sky. No, it's not amazing. It's cancer.
No, I'm just saying, it could be. It's not always a positive thing.
You're not a mega church. You're a tumor.
Hi, Pastor Tumor. Can I biopsy you?
Okay.
Hey, you're a downer, man. That's messed up.
Exactly. Congratulations
Sky doesn't like the ukulele either.
I hate the ukulele.
Congratulations on your growth. I'm here to tell you it's cancer.
I think in most cases it's really just benign.
Benign.
Okay, so the point is...
Benign. It's a really cool theater. And they do these massive stagings of Bible stories that they write them themselves. It's kind
Wait a minute.
What?
If they write them themselves, then how biblical could they be?
They write the book. They write the book and the music.
Oh. So they don't just do like Jesus of Nazareth straight from the scripture?
No. They did that in a movie once.
I know.
It didn't go over all that well. Yeah. Some people loved it, but it.
What about the Jesus movie, the Jesus film?
Yeah, that's not straight from the scriptures.
I think it pretty much is.
It's fairly... Yeah,
Isn't it the Gospel of John?
I'm not saying
something?
it's not accurate.
They still had to have a script for the film, trust me.
You just say that because you guys are in the industry.
Oh,
Yeah,
keep your jobs.
We know, Sky. Leave it to us. We know. Today is the 20th anniversary of the release of the first Harry Potter film.
Can you believe it's been 20 years?
First Harry Potter book.
I'm sorry, book. 20 years ago.
That makes me feel really old.
You know the book had a different title in the UK than it did in the US?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was it?
It was called Perry Hotter.
No, it's still Harry Potter.
Oh.
It's the subtitle.
Which is?
Because in the first book is the Sorcerer's Stone, right? But in the UK, it's the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
And they didn't think American kids would understand what a philosopher is.
What's a philosopher?
So
yeah, because we're stupid. Is that what they're saying? Were they insulting us?
I think so.
Your kids are stupid, so we'll change this name because your kids won't get it.
It worked.
Apparently it worked.
So is
this a day for Christians? Is this a day that lives on in
Do you remember when it came out?
Infamy or fammy?
It was so controversial when it first came out. Like,
I know.
I remember that like parents were banning it and they didn't want anybody to read, and you were
So
so bad if you let your kids
What if you
read
can
it.
point all of the troubles in the American church to this day 20 years ago? Like, what if it all started right
that
there?
Harry Potter ruined the church?
It's the cause of all of our problems.
Overreacting to Harry Potter ruined the church.
I think Christians overreacting predates Harry Potter.
No, that was pretty much the first time we overreacted. There were actually book burnings of the Harry Potter books by conservative Christians.
Well, I think the irony, too, is they're freaking out about this, and yet kids are playing video games where this guy Mario eats a mushroom and magically grows bigger. I mean, it's like, what's the big difference?
There's that growth again. That's cancer.
Exactly.
That's cancer. That little character from Japan has cancer, and we need to start a prayer chain for Mario.
There's a lot of sick things in Mario Brothers.
And his mushroom
There
growth.
are?
But it's cartoon violence. See, Harry Potter is too realistic. Okay, what's the difference between Harry Potter and
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Wizard of Oz? Christians are okay with Wizard of Oz.
Well, Frank Baum was kind of weird too.
Yeah, but he's not around to display his weirdness. So we're okay with Wizard of Oz, even though there's a good witch in the Wizard of Oz. And a lot of people said, well, we don't like that about Harry Potter.
Glinda, right?
All witches are bad. All witchcraft is bad. All witches are bad. If you tell my kids that there can be good witches, then my kids will want to be witches. All of them, even the boys and the dogs. But in Wizard of Oz, there's a good witch, and we're okay with it. Why? My theory, why?
Why?
Let's hear it.
Because it lives in a different world. And in Harry Potter, they're actually in the contemporary London. It's our world. See,
Okay.
Well, it's not contemporary London.
It is.
So if Harry
It was
had
in
been
the
transported...
40s.
No, that's the new movie. That's the new movie. The original.
It's the prequels.
It was in the 80s? That's when it's set?
Yeah, so it wasn't the
Oh, it's close enough.
It wasn't the
But
2000s.
it kind of started in the 80s almost, except for it was 20 years ago.
So it wasn't in contemporary time.
It's close enough.
Okay, so you're saying it's okay if there's good witches in the 80s? Is that what you're saying?
No, I get your point.
Oh, no, I broke my microphone. We got to start over. Just forget everything we've said. We'll say it again.
Back to Phil's original point. Because
it's not in another world.
Oz is a fantasy world.
There's not enough distance between my children and the good witches doing good witchcraft. There's not enough distance. Narnia, there's a lot of distance between witchcraft and my kids because they're in a whole other world. Harry Potter, they're just in London, and they could get on a sailing ship and come to America.
So, don't you think it was just simply the popularity of the Harry Potter books that resulted in the uprising?
You don't think Narnia is popular? You don't
not,
think Wizard of Oz is popular?
I think it's different.
I'm trying to think because I think that's too simplistic of an answer.
It's all I've got. Joey, what do you think? Why are we okay with Oz but not with Potter?
I think you are right on the money, and I've never even thought about that. And I also think that there was like an obsession. I mean, I wasn't around when Wizard of Oz came out, obviously, but I mean, there definitely is an obsession with Harry Potter. People are freaking out over it and waiting in lines and everything. And it's just like, man, are we waiting in line to make a deal with the devil sort of thing? I mean, just because people were losing their minds.
I also think when Harry Potter came out, there was more of a sense in conservative Christianity that the world was trying to get us and our children.
We've moved past that?
No, then, for example, when The Wizard of Oz came out.
Oh, yeah.
Or when Narnia came out. There was, or Lord of the Rings, which has magic in it. Nobody cares about that. We weren't suspicious of stuff that came from New York and L.A. nearly as much.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
But I think here's a component I would add to it.
Yeah,
if I recall 20 years ago when these books hit the market, they were being credited with reintroducing a generation to reading. Remember, like everybody was saying, if your kids don't read, get them the Harry Potter books.
And you're saying that's what we're upset about?
No. I'm saying there was this big drive from like schools and libraries and everything.
Yeah.
And I think it fed that conspiracy theory that it couldn't just be a market-driven phenomenon. There has to be a spiritual force behind the popularity of this book and the fact that all of our schools and institutions want our kids to read it. It kind of gets the tinfoil-wearing hat group of Christians like up in arms because why is everybody so enthusiastic about pushing this on my kids?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of marketing fervor was interpreted as some kind of demonic scheme.
Interesting.
But I also think there's always been on the right this sort of fear that there's something evil lurking underneath, all of these things. Like Dungeons and Dragons.
Backmasking in records.
Yeah.
This was a generation that grew up on the notion of there's the devil in between
everything.
The pages or the lyrics, and we have to find him.
Ouija board.
And root him out.
Which, I'm not saying is not true.
Yeah, well, we're not going to. Yeah.
But, no, there's a lot of stuff like that, actually, and I think it just kind of reached a crescendo with that book, and it's probably a perfect storm of what you said and you said, and Christians always thinking there's some sort of demonic conspiracy happening.
Yep. And my question is, can conservative Christians ever accept stories with magic again? Or is it now?
Haven't there been like 100 knockoff Harry Potter Christian books that tried to present
the magic bicycle?
What?
The magic bicycle.
The magic tree house?
That's not Christian.
I know,
the magic
but
bicycle is. The magic bicycle is.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a trilogy of. Anyway, I can't remember. What about?
Wouldn't that be a magic
Hobbit?
Tricycle?
That predates Harry Potter.
Okay.
So that doesn't count.
So
it doesn't count.
Well,
it's grandfathered in, like Narnia. It's grandfathered in.
There are a lot of conservative Christians who can see that, God can use anything, even the Harry Potter books, to teach his truth.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Do you know them?
I do.
Okay. That's awesome. Joey.
Yes.
You grew up in a somewhat conservative Christian background, right?
Right. Yep, I got back from vacation with my grandparents, and they had bought me Dungeons and Dragons toys, and my parents walked my brother and I through like a ceremony of ripping them apart. So that gives you a picture.
Like a ceremony, not they didn't.
I'd say that, but it was made to be a big deal. Like we aren't going to stand for this, and here's why. Here's what these toys represent. Yeah, and now you're going to rip them apart.
Yeah. So how old were you 20 years ago? I don't know how old you are.
20 years ago, I was 19.
Okay. Were you allowed to read Harry Potter?
Yes, I was allowed.
Okay.
I was allowed.
Were you in college? Did you go off to school?
Yeah, I did. I actually was an education major and was a school teacher for 5 years.
Okay. And did you go to a very conservative Christian college?
Nope. I went to Winthrop University. It's a little south of Charlotte. Big art and teaching school.
Okay. So were you allowed to bring your Dungeons and Dragons toys?
He didn't
with
have
you
them. They ripped them up.
They were ripped apart, sir. They were ripped apart.
He obeyed his parents.
Did you pray Did you pray over them for healing after the ripping ceremony?
No, we did not care about Satan's toys.
So you didn't cry about that.
So what toys were you allowed to play with?
Ninja Turtles?
That's great irony. He-Man. Where the guy says, "I have the power," and it's obviously not Jesus.
Jesus.
Other guy.
Power Rangers,
Star Wars, Transformers, Power Rangers. No, I'm definitely
You're too old.
a little
He's too old for that.
Yeah. Bunch of magic and Star Wars, and I don't know how did Dungeons and Dragons get their bad reputation of actually being Satan's magic?
I think it's because little groups of male American boys went down into the basements in the dark alone and had these little, 10-hour ceremonies over Dungeons and Dragons, and the whole thing just seemed like that. Whatever they're doing down there,
sound good. That does not sound good.
Can't be biblical, because nothing good happens in the basement unless it's a church basement.
Right.
No,
Right.
there were a
Totally.
lot of bad things happening in church basement when I was a teenager.
I don't want to hear those stories.
I mean, Dungeons and Dragons was seriously tossed around like, well, Satan stuff. You have Ouija boards, animal sacrifices,
Magic, the game
Dungeons
Magic.
and Dragons.
Yeah, totally.
And then there was that fourth empty slot that was being kept warm for Harry Potter to sit in when he came along. God bless him.
Yep.
Okay. Do you have kids?
I have 4 kids. One's going into middle school. Youngest is going into K5.
Have they read Harry Potter?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. If so, it's kind of like them catching up on classics, honestly.
Right.
So
right.
I
It's
wouldn't.
like, what
I
is it
wouldn't
this
keep
year,
them from-
Dad? Shakespeare or Potter?
Right. Right. Seriously.
So if the first one was 20 years ago, when was the last one? How long has it been since we've been out of that?
6 years?
I don't know.
5 years?
Longer than that.
7 years?
So it had a good 15-year run.
Yeah. Well,
But then the movies.
there was
and
a
all the-
whole lot of words that she had to write. She wrote a lot.
And every
of
book got
words.
longer.
And they are very good.
Yes.
They're very compelling.
They are.
They're good reads. But when you read Harry Potter and then you go back to Lord of the Rings, it's like, whoa, this is some meandering prose. We just spent 3 paragraphs describing the ferns on the side of this valley.
Can I confess something?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
When I was a seminary student, we had to read thousands and thousands of pages every semester of all this dry theology and history and whatever. So when I finally got a break, I think it was a summer break, or I don't know what break it was, I needed to just cleanse my palate.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any kids. And I read the first 2 Harry Potter books
Yeah.
just as a seminary student, just to
They're-
kick back and enjoy
good
something.
books.
So I don't know if that negated my seminary training. Did it?
Did you ever attempt to cast spells in your seminary classes?
Of course you did.
By
Of course.
speaking
Of
in
course
Latin.
you did, he said.
I did curse some of my teachers.
I remember I had to read the first Harry Potter book first to see if it
Yeah,
was
to
really
see how
evil.
satanic it was.
Yes, before I could let my
Okay.
son read it or read it to him. But that was because all the other women in my church were doing the same thing, and I felt
Yeah.
I felt
It
like
was
a
peer
bad
pressure.
mom.
It
if
was
I
peer
didn't do that.
pressure.
Yeah.
And then you could start the Bad Mom podcast, which would be a
Hey, that's
sister
not a bad idea.
podcast to the
I
Bad
could
Christian
really-
podcast.
You do the
I
bad
could
Christian
really
mom.
head that
So,
up.
Joey,
Yes,
you still there?
I am.
You still with
Why,
us?
why do we have Joey here, as a matter of fact?
Because we want to hear what he's up to. When did you start the Bad Christian podcast, and how did you get to where you are right now? From that young boy who was brutalized by watching his Dungeons
Oh
and
my
Dragons
gosh.
toys get ripped to pieces.
So y'all gonna have a part 2, part 3, part 4
In the
of this
name of-
episode? Let's see. Let
In
me
the
condense
name of
this.
Jesus. Yeah. Then you went off to college and you became a teacher, and then what happened?
Yeah. So early on, I mean, throughout college, super legalistic, very depressed. Didn't realize it at the time. Had a lot of OCD tendencies. You pair that with legalism and the church upbringing that I had, and it's just disastrous. I mean, just craziness. Always feeling guilty about not witnessing. Always feeling guilty about not praying enough and all that sort of thing. So I think college was a time where I parted ways a little bit with the organized every Sunday morning deal. It's almost like I felt like, can't be a sin not to go to church every Sunday morning. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So that was maybe the first step of recognizing, okay, wait a second, I've got something wrong here. And then I remember, I don't know if y'all have heard of Jimmy Eat World, but my brother gave me their first, one of their first full length Static Prevails for my birthday. And I was
Jimmy,
like,
was
"Ugh,
it
this is-
Jimmy
this
Ate
is-
World? Is that what you
Jimmy,
said?
Yep. And I was like, oh, this is not a Christian band. And then I started listening to it. I was like, yeah, but it's just so good. So that was like the first time I owned a non-Christian CD. And I mean, here I am like 21 years old. And
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh, maybe I'm missing out on some stuff. And so through college, I get married. We find a church that her and I both like, the one that I'm working at right now. And even at that point, I was just buried in so much of the stuff that I was taught. I mean, I came from churches where long hair was rebellious. I mean, Carmen. I don't know if y'all remember that guy.
I remember Carmen.
Hey,
Forgotten all about him.
I think I met him once.
His
I've met
concerts.
Carmen.
I mean, when people got saved there, what were they getting saved to? You know, I mean, just everything was just scrutinized. Everything was bad. Shorts were bad. Now, our family didn't buy into all of that, but what we did get trapped into was just how conditional our relationship with God was based on what we do and we don't do. And so I was a messed up kid into my marriage. I mean, just saying the sinner's prayer over and over and over, having to write it down that I did it because my mind was playing tricks saying that, you know, what I hadn't done it yet. So that's all the mental illness sort of stuff. But I'd say, as far as, let's see, we started doing the podcast in 2013, and we started a blog. It was called Unlearning, and I think it was 2012. And basically, we just wanted to write blog posts, talk about the sort of stuff that we are rethinking, refiguring out, things that we believe.
And who was the we at that time? Did you find?
So this was me and Toby Morrell. Him and I had been friends, since 1997. So we're kind of old school pals. And he's in a band called Emery that a lot of Christian tooth and nail fans and people that are into that music have heard of, and they're still kind of going strong. So, but we were both thinking, okay, how can we make some extra money and help our wives stay home a little bit to take care of the kids, because that's what they wanted to do for a season of time. So we thought, hey, write blog posts, and
because it's biblical, it's a biblical mandate. So. Yeah.
I'm going to go on the record and say I do not agree with that. No, just kidding. But basically, it just took off, and we were like, people are actually kind of interested in what we're talking about or how we're talking about it. So friend number 3 comes into the picture, Matt, and he says, man, podcasting is kind of where it's at. We need to do a podcast. And then we're going to start a record label. We're going to take the podcast on the road and all this stuff. And so we talked to a marketing expert, and he reads through a bunch of our blog posts, interviews all of us. And he's just like, man, why don't y'all call yourselves Bad Christian? I did some research. There's nothing like that exists. And that's basically the point of everything that you're saying, is trying to debunk the myth that Christians are these great people, and you're trying to say, no, Jesus is the only good guy, so just call yourselves Bad Christian. I mean, when we heard that, we were like, how did we not think of that? I mean, we were just, it didn't take any convincing at all. All of us were 100% in right from the get-go.
Okay, so, let's unpack that a little.
Yep.
When you say Bad Christian,
he means me.
You don't mean Christians that rob banks on the side, or Christians that are actually Muslims but just pretending that they're Christians.
Right.
What exactly do you mean?
Yeah. Well, I would simply say there's no such thing as a good Christian. And what I mean by that is if it took God having to actually come as a human and give himself up for us to even be able to have a relationship with our Heavenly Father, then we can't, we're not good. And so I believe that so many people have turned their back on churches and maybe just said, I can't be a part of church, or disastrously said, I can't have anything to do with God because of all the hypocrisy. And it's just so unnecessary, because all we need to do is just don't claim to be one thing that we're not. And I think we're all hypocrites from a standpoint of, we all say, hey, here are good things to do, and we don't follow through. But the hypocrisy that Jesus really didn't like was basically saying, I am this sort of person, I am good, and that's just a lie. So the full tagline is Bad Christian, Great Savior. And it definitely comes with the sacrifice of people thinking that we think we're so cool. Oh, Bad Christian, you guys think you're awesome. Or, oh, you guys brag about being sinful and promote sin. And we knew it was going to come with all that. But unfortunately, that just comes with the territory. But that's the point we're trying to get across, is we're not good. So if we're not good, then what are we? We're not neutral.
Do you feel
you're talking to two people here to my left and right that are actually bad Christians, according to a lot of people on their comments in their websites.
Yeah, we get in trouble
as well. They get into a lot of trouble.
Do you think you're getting better at being a Christian? Or are you equally bad as you've always been?
Oh, the sanctification conversation. Well, I believe that. So if you ask the three of us, Matt, Toby, and I, this question, you'd probably get different answers. I think Toby believes that we don't get too much better. I mean, that's for sure. He thinks that and I think maybe when we get to heaven, we'll realize, oh my gosh, we did not get too much better. But yeah, I definitely think that we get better, but then I think we may be too quick to put that on us and not put that on God as helping us get better. But, then you come into the territory of these pastors that we put on such high pedestals that everyone is saying, yes, that person is who I'm trying to be like. That person has his act together. And all along, maybe they've been having an affair for the past couple of years. And then that debunks the whole thing. And it's just like, why do we have to have Christians in this category as the good guys? So when people say, well, what does bad Christian mean? We basically say, well, that's synonymous with Christian to us. All Christians are bad.
There is no good Christian and the best Christian. The only,
it's an oxymoron.
Saying
good
about
Christian?
Indians.
What does that even mean?
There's no such thing.
Why are you making fun of Indians?
I'm not, but that's what Americans used to say about Native
The
Americans.
only good Indian is a dead Indian?
Indian, yeah.
Well, how about what Jesus said? Why do you call me good? There's none good but God.
Oh, so you're saying that Jesus wasn't even good? Oh, no, now we're in trouble.
No, he was kind of questioning the guy's motives and answer.
You can't get out
I
of it
want to
now.
stay away from racist cliches,
That's probably
unlike you, who kind of thrive on them and like to use them.
Okay, no fighting.
The only good
just a
Christian is a dead Christian, because until we've died to ourselves, we can't live to Christ.
I like that.
Look at that.
Thank you.
Dead Christian. I like that.
He shoots, he scores.
Hey, there you go. There's your next episode, Dead Christian.
Okay, so how much are you doing now? How elaborate has this thing gotten? And don't you still have a day job where you have to go be a pastor somewhere?
Yep. Well, so first of all, Seacoast is a very, you could probably read between the lines and figure this out, but it's a very unique church in that there's not a whole lot of close-handedness. Most churches, especially with the, popularity, I hate using that word, but Seacoast has been around for a very long time, and has kind of helped pioneer the multi-church deal. So a lot of people have heard of Seacoast, and yet we've never really had like a celebrity pastor, and we've always maintained this sense of, hey, we're not trying to protect a brand. And so what I've been doing with Bad Christian, it's just, it would not have been possible at other churches. It just would not have. So, and I think that's the heart of our church is there's not a one size fits all of how God calls us. And we welcome the opportunity of having diversity at this church, especially with how we do things. But it hasn't come with a price. I mean, it hasn't come without a price. There's definitely been some conflict along the way with people saying, whoa, wait a second, you mean a pastor of Seacoast is also the host of Bad Christian? What's the deal with that?
So do people automatically associate that whatever you say on the podcast is representative of the church as a whole, and that's kind of what gets you in hot water?
No, so I hate even bringing this up because everybody asks questions about this, and to us, it's not even, there's just even no reason to talk about it because it's not even an issue. But
we're talking about it.
No, the cussing. So we say a lot of words that most people would deem as cuss words, and I think the big difference here is we don't even know what a cuss word is. Like, that seems to be more cultural. So our thing with that has always been, look, let's be polite. Let's be culturally sensitive. Let's not say certain words in front of people that it's going to come across offensive. And then people are just like, well, why do you do that on the podcast? We're like, because our audience doesn't care and we're not offending anyone. But that just, it's always something people want to talk about. And, obviously being a Christian in the South, everybody agrees. Even people that don't believe in God, don't go to church. Everybody agrees what the cuss words are. And if we're Christians, we shouldn't be saying them. So that's caused obviously a lot of people to raise their
And
eyebrows.
is that, would you put that in the category of intentional provocation?
No.
Like when Sky comes onto the podcast not wearing a shirt, same sort of thing.
Well, hey, I feel gypped, man. You got a shirt on. I feel gypped. No, for us, it like we set out to, like, one of our goals was, hey, the three of us are super close friends. And so when we're not around people, we talk a certain way, we talk about things in a certain way. And so we want, to the best of our ability, to be that on the podcast, because here's what's crazy is I don't think I've ever talked to a pastor behind closed doors where they wouldn't say words to me that they would not use in front of a bunch of people. And I don't think that's bad. I mean, that's their choice. But for us, we've just decided, hey, let's try to talk how we talk behind closed doors. Let's try to do that on the podcast. Now, we can't. Obviously, there is limitations because, we can be some vulgar, crazy dudes when it's just us cutting up behind closed doors. But that's our goal. It's not to purpose, honestly, has it helped our downloads? Probably so, because I could just imagine conversations. Man, have you heard this podcast? They're Christians. They talk about Jesus and they cuss. You got to check it out. And I'm sure some people will check it out just to see if it's true.
Could it be true?
Well, it sounds interesting to me because what you were saying in the very beginning about your upbringing. I grew up in Mississippi, so my upbringing was super, super similar, and that was the biggest break. If you said a cuss word, I remember I held it in for such a long time. I never said a cuss word in front of my parents until one day I was washing dishes and it was dark outside and I burnt my hand and I said, I started to say it.
Yeah, no.
I can't do that on our podcast.
No.
Anyway, I started to say it. And my mother leaned in and said, "What did you say, young lady?" And I was grounded for a week and I was in so much trouble. And it was a big deal. But it sounds like to me what you're saying is you're trying to live out what you're talking about. That being a Christian isn't in the rules. It's not in the legalism part of it. These are just words that we've ascribed meaning to in themselves. They're not...
Yeah, and it's not even that we think it's that important, honestly. It's like, why do Christians feel like we need to have our own language that not only do we create certain phrases that mean nothing to people that aren't in the church, and that can be a little tricky and a little spooky, but why do we feel like we need to subtract a bunch of words that who got to say that they're bad? Like, seriously, who's the authority on what word is good and what word is bad? And I know it sounds crazy to people, and I think I probably think more along these lines. Matt and Toby, they just don't even care about this sort of thing. But we have actually had people write us saying something along the lines of, "Man, how you guys talk on the podcast, I automatically got sucked in and was like, okay, these are my people." And what they mean by that is these are Christians that we can relate to. They're not trying to be something that they aren't, and they don't get all bent out of shape about saying SHIT instead of CRAP, because who cares? It just doesn't matter. And so there are some people that does mean something to them. And I don't think that was our original intent, but it's definitely been a byproduct of people just being like, "Oh, okay, I get this. I understand where these guys are coming from."
Okay.
Didn't George Carlin do a whole routine years ago about the seven words you can't say on TV?
Yeah. Which for the most part, depending on whether it's network or cable, you still can't say them on network TV.
Okay, not too long ago, there was a big kind of movement among some groups, particularly Baptist folks, young pastors who got all bent out of shape about the prohibition against drinking alcohol. So it became like this whole thing about, we're going to drink alcohol, we're going to have beer.
Yeah.
In fact, we're going to do these theology on tap events at bars where we get together and talk about how reformed we are.
Yeah.
And it became
We've been saved from our wayward past.
Right, but it kind of became this brand of, I'm a Christian, but I'm not one of those Christians.
Right.
So is now using cuss words the new beer? Is that kind of where
unfortunately, I think you're right. And
Our 10 o'clock service is traditional. Our 11 o'clock service is our cussing service.
That's like smoking and non-smoking.
Yeah.
Would you like
I think the most important question, though, is this a bad thing? And I think the quick answer to that is no, but it is bad that it's a thing that we have to talk about and identify, and we have to. Like, I mean, there's no way that you can skirt this issue because everybody wants to talk about it, but it can't be a bad thing that, oh yeah, now Christians are becoming less legalistic about alcohol and saying certain words. Mm-hmm. That has to be good, right?
Yeah, I write a daily devotional. Right now we're going through Matthew 25 and the final judgment. And it's striking. I mean, it's not a comprehensive look at what, everything that will be judged, but the goats who are put on the left that Jesus sends us, they're not condemned because they cuss or because they did. Actually, they're not condemned for doing anything.
I thought that was so insightful today.
They're condemned because they didn't do something, which was show compassion to the poor and the forgotten and the marginalized. So when you look at what it is that people get all bent out of shape about in American evangelicalism versus what Jesus gets bent out of shape about in the Gospels, there's almost no overlap.
How do we know there wasn't a whole other group of goats that got sent to hell for cussing, though?
Exactly.
And they just didn't make it into the book.
Well, then we got.
You have no idea how many goats are in hell right now. No idea.
If that's how you're going to read it, then you got a bigger problem about the insufficiency of Scripture.
Oh wow! He pulled a
y'all
fast
just would
one
not
on
believe
me.
how many times people write us though, and or tweet us, and they're just like, "Oh, this is really cool. Christians that cuss, blah blah blah." And I mean, I can't say that I don't understand where they're coming from, especially if they only hear us for 2 minutes and then they turn it off. And I understand, they're just like, oh, these are just goofballs that are. I mean, it's funny because we kind of have an unsaid rule, like don't say a dirty word within the first 2 minutes because people will turn it off and they won't really understand who we are as people. But now it's a joke when we break the rule right away.
Well, so. I got to admit, I mean, I think the cussing does strike people. Probably there's a shock value to it, but the episodes I've listened to of you guys, you have some really insightful, thought through critiques of the evangelical industrial complex that I think more people need to hear and wrestle with. So
thanks, man.
There's meaty content there. It's not just shock jock value stuff.
I haven't listened to it yet, and I apologize, but I will after this because it sounds quite interesting. But tell me some of the subject matter that you guys deal with. We first of all talk about a lot of personal stuff, and so we always want to deal with the things that we're struggling with personally or having fun with personally. So we always try to incorporate our daily life into it. But I mean, everything from one pastor that fell to this pastor who bought a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar house to this Christian that says he's gay, and some people agree, some people disagree. So, a lot of the low-hanging fruit of topics that people like to hear. But then we interview, like we had Lecrae on, who's a popular Christian hip-hop artist, and talked with him. The Aaron Gillespie, who used to be with Under Oath, NFL football players. So just, guests with unique stories or interesting success and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, so we just, it's kind of a little bit about everything. But I would say that a lot of what people want to hear from us, and here's our philosophy, is it's unfortunate that talking critically about fellow Christians or fellow religious establishment is seen as divisive and seen as dishonoring, because what that's done is that's set up pastors as like untouchables. And we've all seen how that has failed us big time, because the when the biggest names really get discovered with what's going on behind closed door, and they're not all doing that, but a lot of them do, everybody just loses their mind. They're like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. I can't believe. And we just want to be able to say, wait a second, let's be able to have constructive criticism publicly. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys have heard of Stephen Furtick, but I'm sure he's a great guy. Like, he is one of the most dynamic speakers I've ever heard in my life. I mean, he's a young guy, younger than me, pastor of Elevation Church. But can we
at least talk about the fact that maybe his house cost too much money? I mean, can we even say that without people saying you're hate-filled Christians that just want to judge other people? No, or maybe bad Christian, for example, given that we have thousands of listeners, maybe that comes with the territory, that if we say something that's out of line and someone calls us out on it, that's good. Like, why is that a bad thing? And why would we return that with, how dare you talk to us? You're just being judgmental. Or maybe we can just all get along and not.
Well, it sounds like to me that's it could be in a positive light, being iron sharpening iron.
Yeah, but the criticism I hear is people overapply, I think, Matthew 18. That's the text where Jesus talks about if your brother's in sin, go and confront him, blah, blah, blah. And if you won't listen, then take another person. And then and if they won't listen, then bring a podcast. Right. But I think honestly, I think that in a lot of evangelicalism, especially among leaders, they are so thin-skinned and they misapply that text about confronting one another. I'll give you an example. In one of my books, I quoted another Christian writer who's a pastor. I quoted his book and disagreed with him in my book. And we ended up meeting each other at some event and had a pleasant meeting together about something or other. After the fact, somebody pointed out, Sky quoted you in his book and disagreed with you. He called me up and chewed me out on the phone because I quoted him in my book rather than came to him privately and disagreed with him. And I said, well, time out. I'm not accusing you of any sin. You wrote something in a book, in a public forum. I quoted that public book in my public book and disagreed with part of it. That's just Christians having a dialogue in the public square of a book. But he wanted to see it as, no, if you agree with me as publicly as you want, but if you disagree with me, we have to do that in private. We have to disagree in private. Right. And I'm like, if this was a private discussion, you'd be absolutely correct, but you wrote it in a book.
So how did it end?
Yeah. So it ended with him just being furious with me.
Fist fight.
Wow.
But
they punched it out.
That's the kind of.
Kill this guy? Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive. But
he is not a terrorist, by the way. I know he looks like one, but he's really not.
Now he's the president of the United
States.
States.
The kind of.
So you have two racists on this podcast, guys.
There you go. So that's the kind of things, and I've seen it in many places. Like we had a well-known megachurch pastor write something for us at Leadership Journal on our blog. And people started disagreeing with him in the comment section, and he flipped out on us. And we're like, dude, you're writing in public. People are going to disagree. But some of these guys are so isolated, they don't have anybody around them that ever disagrees with them. And so when they hear it on a podcast or in the comment section, they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, and to me, too, that just screams of anti-Christianity. I thought we were all supposed to have our eyes on this Jesus guy. And if we're so oversensitive about someone saying something negative about us, I mean, we are making it about ourselves. Yeah. And I know we're all going to fall into that because, we do make mistakes and we are flawed human beings, but come on, man. That is just so out of hand when we can't even disagree publicly.
Last question, because we're running out of time. You wrote a book called Fundamentalist.
Yeah.
Clearly, you characterize your background as fundamentalist, and sounds like you would consider yourself a recovering fundamentalist of sorts, or that's something.
Reformed fundamentalist.
Reform, yeah. So here's my question, because in parts of our culture, fundamentalism and evangelicalism are considered the same thing. The mainstream press can't make a distinction. How do you distinguish, when you say fundamentalist, what do you mean? How do you know when you are one? How do you know when you're not one? How are you defining your terms?
Fundamentalism, and on the book, by the way, the mental part is emboldened just because a huge part of my story is the mental illness that was paired with it. But I think fundamentalism is, I honestly think fundamentalism and evangelicalism are both becoming pretty useless words. I think they're both very subjective.
Yeah.
But when I think of a fundamentalist, I think of very rigid, not open to discussion. You believe something because your Sunday school teacher told you as you were a kid, and you've never been open to any other interpretation of a certain verse.
And you never looked back.
Right. And very, very works-oriented rather than grace-oriented. Because honestly, when you have to talk more about do's and don'ts, which I feel is a huge part of fundamentalism, you're kind of missing the point big time.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that's what it was about. I mean, I always felt condemned. I always felt like if I could accept Christ, but if I swear when I'm in the car and then I run off the road and hit a tree and die, I'm in hell forever and ever.
So there was a very high degree of legalism mixed in with your Christian doctrine.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Anything else, Guy? You good?
Oh, I could talk for hours.
I'm good.
You can talk for hours.
Could talk for hours.
Would you attempt to define fundamentalism, or do you think it's just lost?
No, I think it can be defined, and I think you can define fundamentalism beyond the Christian variety.
Sure.
There's obviously Islamic fundamentalism
there's
and Hindu
fundamentalism.
fundamentalism.
Anything. Baseball.
And part of it is it's aggressively
be a fundamental baseball.
Well, but there's an aggressive attempt to dismantle pluralism, meaning there's no room for diversity of opinion or ideas,
right,
either within your little tribe or even outside of it.
But originally, historically, fundamentalism was a movement to reclaim the fundamentals.
Right, that's back in the 19
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that anymore.
20s, and then it just kind of wandered off into its own thing.
Now it's like an adjective.
And originally, evangelicalism was an attempt to recapture the middle ground between fundamentalism and progressivism.
Right.
And now
it's
that's
a noun.
wandered off, and it's not even.
Well, and the difference is,
It's a bad word,
here's how
actually.
I don't think this is. I think both these terms are really problematic now. They're kind of lost to our culture. But here's the difference, as I would put it. Fundamentalism is about defining the boundary.
Yeah.
Right. Who's in and who's out. Healthy evangelicalism is about defining the center and saying this is the center of our faith and it's focused on Jesus Christ, and then various people are orbiting that at different altitudes, but we're going to define the center rather than the boundaries.
So when John Piper says, "Farewell, Rob Bell," is he acting like a fundamentalist?
That is a fundamentalist kind of statement. Yes.
He's out of the circle.
You're too far from our center. The bungee has snapped.
Yes, right.
There's no recalling you to the center now. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider The Bad Christian an evangelical podcast?
No, I would not.
Okay.
Because we're setting out to be ourselves and let that be public, and that's our first and foremost goal. And I think we all have a faith rooted enough in Jesus where we trust him more than ourselves, and that's why we're willing to be what many people call reckless. We would just call it trying to be honest and let Jesus, take care of it. So
Recklessism.
yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm reformed reckless though.
Hey,
Reformed.
if people want to find your podcast, it's on iTunes, Bad Christian Podcast.
Yeah, iTunes, badchristian.com. The book is at fundamentalistpastor.com. So yeah, we're pretty easy to find.
Cool. So people looking for a fundamentalist pastor, they get your book about how you're not a fundamentalist pastor.
There you go, man. You have tagged me big time. You
Also, intentionally provocative. Okay, I have to summarize this. Oh, my friend Joey, he's a bad Christian, but better to say it, he's kinda on a mission, and I think that you could say he's wishing that we'd all recognize that we're bad Christians too. And isn't it fun when we can discuss if you can go on a Christian podcast and then start to cuss? And why does everybody make such a fuss when we use a word or two that classic comedians would call blue?
Or others askew, eschew.
Would make my mother look at me askew.
There you go.
Oh, so thanks, Joey Svendsen. All
Nice
right.
pronunciation.
Thank you very much. What's going on? What do we need to know? Your book's still on sale, Sky.
Yeah, you can get it at on Amazon or what'swrongwithreligion.com. Thank you guys, those of you who have left reviews on Amazon. That's super helpful. We're trying to do some more bulk sales. Here's the deal. If I can sell out the first run of books, I can pay back the investors, and then I can actually make a living.
Yeah.
So we're looking for
Sky,
some more
make a living.
bulk
Yes.
sales to schools, colleges, churches, things like that. You can get great discounts, so contact us.
How many copies of the book would one person have to buy so that you could make a living?
I'm not sure how many we have left. We're probably around 2,000 books.
2,000. Buy 2,000 books, and you can feed my starving sky.
There you go.
And so that I can eat as well, if you or anyone you know needs a voiceover done for just about anything, let me know. Look me up.
Christian's in a little slow spell.
Yeah, it's been really slow for me.
Needs
so
work.
you can look up. Hold on a second.
Okay, go ahead.
So you can look up either neighborladyvo.com, which would be me, or TaylorProductionsLTD.com.
How many names do you have now?
More than that. I won't go into it. They just need to remember those two.
And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Phil Vischer, and you can give us $2 a month, and we'll use it to buy drinks and pay the unnamed interns. Okay, we will see you next week. Thanks for coming.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.